Believe it or not, this restaurant is ours and it's meant for my oldest son and his wife. If you don't like it, then get a divorce,"
yelled my husband in a fit of rage. Following him, my husband's brother, now called Mike, made his arrogant claim.
"I'm part of this family too, you know. Surely I deserve some part in the restaurant."
Not to be left out, Mike's wife Karen also berated me. "You don't deserve to run such a fine establishment. Get out already." I felt a surge of anger within me. I couldn't care less about what happened to these people. I decided there and then to put them in their place once and for all. The first order of business to correct their misguided notions. I can't help but smirk at the thought of the look on their faces when they find out the truth. My name is Natalie Farrell. At 35, I'm running a sushi restaurant. I have many regular customers and thankfully the business is doing well. The shop was originally started by my grandparents. Both of my parents passed away from illness when I was young, so my grandparents became my guardians. As I helped out in the shop, I became interested in becoming a sushi chef and taking over the shop. After graduating from the culinary school, I started working in the restaurant immediately. I learned how to make sushi from my grandfather and how to serve customers from my grandmother. Thanks to their guidance, I became a competent chef and developed proper etiquette. For a while, the three of us ran the shop. But when I turned 23, a man named Steve Farrell came to our shop. He was 5 years older than me. He used to be a sushi chef, but the shop he had been working at had closed down, so he was looking for a new job. My grandparents were considering retirement due to their old age. They had mentioned that they wanted one more employee, so we decided to hire him. His skills were undeniable, and he quickly became a valuable asset. I learned a lot from him, and we eventually grew close and got married when I was 25. My grandparents thought Steve was a reliable and honest man, and they felt secure with him. Our married life went well, and after my grandparents retired, we continued to run the shop together, supporting each other. However, when I was 31, my grandmother passed away from an illness. The following year, my grandfather also passed away. Since then, my husband's attitude started to change gradually. When I was in the kitchen, he would become grumpy and started saying things like,
You should focus on serving the customers. I want to hone my sushi making skills, so I want to be in the kitchen as much as possible."
Since he was so passionate about sushi, I understood and began to take over more of the serving duties. However, the real reason behind my husband's change of attitude was something different. About half a year later, I overheard him saying something on the phone.
"Natalie is a woman, right? I don't like the fact that she's a sushi chef."
I was very sad. I was shocked to learn that my loving husband thought this way about me. Sushi is a traditional dish and there's a strong tradition of male dominance in this field. Therefore, the number of female sushi chefs is low. However, this attitude is starting to change and there are more restaurants accepting female chefs. And I believe I am able to provide sushi that satisfies our customers. I wish he wouldn't dislike me just because I'm a woman. After hanging up the phone, my husband finally noticed my presence and hastily tried to gloss over his comments.
"I was just stressed out and said it without thinking. I promise I won't say it again. Will you forgive me?"
Seeing him seemingly regretful, I decided to forgive him. However, my husband started causing more problems. One day, I noticed that $3,000 had been withdrawn from our savings account. When I confronted him, he said,
My brother Mike lost his job and I had to help him out. He's family after all. There's nothing we can do."
Frankly, I didn't like it. The reason being, Mike is a problematic person. He initially aimed to be a chef, but quit early due to the rigorous training and has been job hopping ever since. Every time we met, he would ask for money, and he gave off a very irresponsible impression. His wife, Karen, also can't hold a job. Despite this, she always had an aggressive attitude towards me, saying things like, "You must be so tired from working all the time. I'm a housewife, so I enjoy my free life." I wondered if there was any need to support these people with hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're adults and they're healthy. I wish they could figure it out for themselves. Our restaurant was profitable, but our savings were steadily decreasing. At first, when I pointed out to him that he was giving too much, he seemed to reflect on his behavior and said, "Sorry." But later on, he said,
Natalie, you're the one managing our savings and household budget, right? You should just manage it better.
and refused to listen to my advice. The situation with my husband was getting worse, and I was starting to worry seriously about our future savings. I briefly considered divorce, but eventually decided against it. Steve is an excellent craftsman, and without him, our restaurant would suffer. Besides, Steve has always been a responsible person. I clung to this thin hope that he would pull himself together someday. Later, I would realize how naive this thought was. Years have passed since my grandparents passed away, and we arrive at the present day. At this point, an event occurred that I could no longer tolerate. On our restaurant's day off, while I was doing the laundry at home, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Mike and Karen.
Hey, from today on, I can eat sushi every day now, right? Lucky me.
Their words made no sense. As I was at a loss, Steve appeared and I demanded an explanation. Casually, he said,
They will be living with us for a while from today on.
I was even more confused. Upon further inquiry, I learned that Mike and Karen were in dire financial straits and couldn't even afford their apartment rent. Upon learning this, Steve had taken it upon himself to allow them to stay with us for a while. What's more, neither Mike nor Karen were working, so we were expected to cover their living expenses as well. I told Steve, "Don't make decisions like that without discussing with me first." But he shrugged it off, saying,
They're our family, so it doesn't matter.
and so their cohabitation began forcibly. Needless to say, my stress levels skyrocketed. Not only this, but Steve took Mike and Karen to our restaurant and allowed them to eat expensive sushi for free. They ate up sushi without a care in the world, chattering and making noise. Steve even announced in front of our other customers,
I'll treat my brother and Karen.
even our regular customers seemed to find this odd. One of our regulars, a man named Tucker, frowned and warned Steve.
Steve, it's not right to let them eat for free just because they're your family. It will affect the restaurant's business, won't it?
Steve pretended to reflect upon his words, saying,
I'm sorry.
Tucker is our regular customer, and we have been close since I was a child. He's like a beloved grandfather to me, and he's always there for me, saying,
If you ever have a hard time, feel free to talk to me.
However, despite Tucker's warning, Steve didn't stop giving preferential treatment to Mike and Karen. Steve never scolded Mike and always showed a soft smile towards Karen. Watching Steve like this, a suspicion began to form in my mind. I hope I was just misunderstanding, but my suspicion would later prove correct. When my stress was at its breaking point, a major incident occurred. One day off, Steve, Mike, and Karen told me they had important news.
Actually, we have decided to hand over our restaurant to Mike and Karen. It's been Mike's dream to become a chef, and we thought it would be a good idea.
I felt dizzy. Running a restaurant is tough. I couldn't believe that Mike and Karen could manage it. And I didn't want to give the restaurant that we inherited from our grandparents to people like them. I firmly told them. Then Steve, Mike, and Karen all became furious. Steve yelled at me loudly.
That's my restaurant. What I do with it is my business. Whether you like it or not, the restaurant will belong to Mike and Karen. If you don't like it, get a divorce.
Mike also arrogantly said,
I'm part of the family too, right? Just give me the restaurant.
Karen berated me, saying, "You're not worthy of that restaurant. Get out quickly." I was filled with intense anger. I no longer cared what happened to these people. I decided to retaliate against them once and for all. First, I decided to correct the three's misunderstanding. I chuckled to myself, wondering what their faces would look like once they learned the truth. I don't know what you guys are misunderstanding, but the restaurant is something I inherited from my grandparents. It's in my name, so I can't transfer it to Steve, Mike, or Karen. As I explained this, my husband looked surprised.
But I'm your husband. I should have the right to do as I please with the restaurant.
Inheritances go to blood relatives. Since we don't have children, my inheritance is mine alone. Steve finally seemed to understand the mechanics of inheritance and was stunned. I was almost dumbfounded by his lack of common sense because Steve was so dedicated to sushi he lacked some common knowledge. I have often felt this way in our married life. Then, Mike started to make a fuss.
Hey, you should have explained this beforehand.
I finally raised my voice in anger. What? You guys were the ones who proceeded with the conversation based on your misunderstandings. You didn't even give me the time to explain. What are you saying? Annoyingly, Mike tried to counter further.
But we don't care about whose name it's in. We can run the restaurant on our own. You're no longer needed, so get out.
I really decided to leave if I stayed here any longer. I thought I might explode with anger. I packed only the essentials, said goodbye, and stormed out of the house. After leaving the house, I initially stayed in a cheap business hotel. There, I strategized about what to do next. I had no desire to make amends with Steve. I had finally realized that the kind Steve was nowhere to be found. I don't know if that was his true nature or if something had twisted his personality. But suddenly, I felt foolish for trusting such a horrible man. I wanted to punish him. I also wanted Mike and Karen to leave my house. I wondered how I could drive them out. After thinking about it, I made various calls and formally launched a revenge plan. I also went out for a bit, and after about a week, my preparations were complete. So I returned home. Seeing me, Steve and the couple looked triumphant. Steve smirked and looked at me.
Hey, finally reflecting and came back, huh? But returning in just a week, you lack resolve.
Hearing this, the couple laughed heartily. Suppressing my anger, I showed them several photos. They were stunned at that moment, but Steve and Karen's faces turned pale. Meanwhile, Mike asked in confusion,
What are these photos?
These are photos proving Steve and Karen's affair, I declared in a cold tone. The photos showed Steve and Karen walking arm in arm, appearing to enjoy themselves. The other photos also captured their intimate moments. Mike finally seemed to understand the situation and began to blush in anger.
Hey, what is this? You have betrayed me with an affair?
Mike's anger was fierce. However, Steve didn't apologize but instead doubled down.
Shut up. It can't be helped. I fell in love. You were wandering around outside and I happened to go out with Karen.
Karen also began making pitiful excuses. It's your fault for not working. Compared to that, Steve is a respectable artisan. It's clear who I would choose. Karen hasn't been working either, and Steve, who's having an affair, is not someone trustworthy at all. I was beyond angry and more disgusted. The three of them had started a low-level argument, and it seemed like it was spiraling out of control. Somehow, I managed to calm them down despite the frustration bubbling within me. Once he had calmed down a bit, my husband glared at me.
How did you get these photos? You've been following us?
No, I replied. I hired a detective to gather evidence of your affair. That's how I got these pictures. So that's why I had been visiting a detective agency. My husband ranted.
Hiring a detective is coward.
But the real coward was my adulterous husband. Well, it's unlikely he would understand that. Then Mike asked a question.
How did you realize my brother was having an affair? You must have suspected something to hire a detective.
I let out a chuckle. Of course, I could tell we are married after all. I noticed right away how excessively sweet he was acting around Karen. The smile he had for her was completely different from the one he showed me or our customers. My husband was speechless. He must have thought he wouldn't get caught. In his shock, he revealed too much in front of my grandparents. How he had acted as innocent as a cat, how he had married me for my shop, how he didn't really love me, and so on. I looked at him coldly, my heart aching. Despite loving you so much, I was betrayed by you. I have endured a lot of pain. Do you understand how much I have suffered? Can you imagine how much you have made me worry? At my harsh words, my husband finally fell silent. He looked remorseful, but I had no intention of forgiving him. Steve and Karen were silent too. probably feeling awkward. Finally, there was some quiet, and I continued. I will be claiming damages from both Karen and Steve. Be prepared. At these words, Karen erupted, Wait, I have no money. How can you claim damages from someone like me? I cut off Karen's words. All you have to do is work and earn money. You can pay in installments. It's inconceivable to hurt someone and not make amends. Karen, looking shocked, could only manage a weak, okay, and then fell silent again. I took out the divorce papers I had already filled out and made my husband fill in the necessary parts. All I have to do now is submit these to the office, and I can say goodbye to the bothersome man. The matter of the affair was now more or less settled. However, there was still something left to be done by the three of them. I asked them, You didn't just cause me trouble, did you? The three of them looked clueless. They really didn't seem to understand, so I reluctantly explained, You treated the customers of our shop poorly, right? I have been in regular contact with our regulars over the past week, and they all voiced their complaints. The main complaints were that despite the many mistakes, they never apologized, and they loudly insulted customers in the staff-only area. There was even a claim that Mike tried to steal change. When I told them about these complaints, their faces turned pale. Since you have caused so much trouble for our valued customers, I will have you apologize. I'm going to call our regulars now and have you apologize. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, I briefly explained the situation, and then my husband, Mike, and Karen apologized in that order. We repeated this process several times. All of our regulars were understandably angry at the three, so the apology took much longer than expected. I knew Tucker's address, so I had them go and apologize to him directly. When Tucker saw the three, he raised his voice. You were absolutely terrible. How dare you face people with that attitude? No matter how delicious your sushis are, I will never have them again. Then he looked at me and smiled kindly. Natalie, you should cut ties with these people. Even if Steve leaves, a more skilled artisan will come to your place. Yes, I am divorcing my husband too. Thank you for all your help. I'm truly grateful. Before carrying out this plan, I had also sought advice from Tucker, which had proven immensely helpful. I thanked him deeply. After leaving Tucker's house, I made sure to let Mike, Steve, and Karen know that I had reported all their misdeeds, including their infidelity, to our regulars. You three might want to continue working as chefs, but I don't think our regulars will be visiting your restaurants. If they tell others, those people probably won't either, I said. Adding insult to injury, even if the three didn't run a restaurant, the mental damage of their embarrassment being known to so many people would be significant. I told them to pack their things and get out immediately, which they did. After they were kicked out, they seemed to get into a heated argument about what to do next. They were making such a commotion in the street that the police were called and they were taken away. They were trouble to the end. The three didn't end up with criminal records, but they did split up and started living separately. Mike and Karen got divorced too. I submitted the divorce papers to the government office and cleanly cut ties with my husband. Mike is still unemployed and living a poor life. I heard he's struggling daily to dodge debt collectors because of the substantial debt he owes. As I promised, I demanded alimony from my husband and Karen. Karen seems to have found a job for now. However, she was unemployed for a long time, so she can't suddenly become a high earner, and her salary seems to be quite low compared to her peers. My husband also managed to find a job and relocated to a remote state where he didn't know anyone. Yet rumors have a way of leaking out, and their past wrongdoings became known, leaving them with no place to hide. In particular, my husband and Karen have to keep working to pay their debts. I imagine their days are tougher than they expected. I hope they suffer. Even after my husband left, the restaurant is doing well. My regulars who learned about the incident started coming to the restaurant more frequently to support me. I had fewer chances to be in the kitchen due to my husband, but I have been practicing in secret, so my skills haven't deteriorated. The enjoyable days have returned and I'm living a fulfilling life. We have also gained a new employee. She's a girl who just graduated from vocational school. She's still an apprentice and has a lot to learn, but I sense a flair in her. Her attitude towards the customers is excellent, so she is well regarded among the regulars. Since we're both women, we found it easier to connect with each other, and she sometimes confides in me about her worries. I think we're building a good relationship. I even consider having her inherit the restaurant in the future. But I intend to keep doing my best as an active chef for now. While cherishing this restaurant that I inherited from my grandparents, I wanted to keep growing both as a sushi chef and as an individual.